Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. We got a couple of guests on the show today. Normally we just do one guest. Today we're doing two, and you're still going to get the podcast for the low, low price of free. So isn't that great for you? Our first guest is Brian Kroshus. He is North Dakota's tax commissioner, who I thought was going to have to be on the ballot this year because he's been on like every ballot in the last 6 years. Because he was a public service commission, and then he got appointed to the tax commission. And for some reason, I thought he had to be on the ballot again this year. And so I sent it. This is very funny. I sent Brian a text saying, are you going to be running for re-election? Because I wrote that story about, who the statewide is going to be running for re-election. I sent him the text, and he told me, yes, I'm going to be running for re-election. So I wasn't the only one who mistakenly thought that Brian Kroshus was going to be on the ballot this year. For a hot minute, he thought he was going to be on the ballot too. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rob.
Yeah.
I think it was instinctive having, like you said, run the last 3 cycles in a row. And I thought it's a little early to be announcing for 2026, but that's my intent at this point.
For the record, he did confirm that he's running for re-election in 2026. So,
I think what the public has been longing for is longer campaigns. Let's make these statewide elections 2.5 years, thanks to Rob Port.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right?
You failed to introduce me again.
I failed to introduce. I didn't. I was still getting to it. You interjected, Chad. My co-host, Chad Oban, who's a little pushy today, is also on the line. Brian, we brought you on not to hee-haw about my idiosyncratic approach to covering politics in North Dakota. We brought you on to talk about property tax credits, right? It's a credit? That's what we're calling it, right? Property tax.
It is a credit.
A credit that the legislature passed. It's $500. Your office is accepting the the filings now. And I got to tell you, as somebody who did it, it worked really well, Brian. I mean, congratulations for the number of times that we see the government do something online like this, and then there's a big crush of people that come to it. The process worked very well. It was very easy. It took me all of 5 minutes. Congratulations. Well executed.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And the credit goes to the team. We, leading up to this, we spent months in development. And when you look at it online, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy process. That's the feedback we've consistently gotten. Every now and then there's an exception, and we're working with those people very closely on a one-on-one basis to make sure we get it resolved and that they get their credit. But the team worked really hard on trying to come up with, we just wanted something that was easy to use, straightforward, and I think just applied some North Dakota common sense to how we went about it. And so far it's been effective.
Commissioner, I want to reiterate what Rob just said. I also applied, and it took under 5 minutes. And I've talked to a lot of people, encouraged them to apply, and everybody's having a good experience. And the other thing that I'm finding is people are super excited about this. It's strange that people want, I shouldn't say a free $500 because it's, but to get that tax credit on property taxes. Can you talk a little bit about, so this is for the 2024 taxable year, so people won't see this until next fall on their initial statement. Can you talk about that timeline? And then also, is this just for 2024 or is it 2024 and 2025?
You framed it up correctly. They will receive it and see the credit on the property tax statement that they will be getting this coming December. So not the one that they just got in the mail. That's for the 2023 property tax year. This is for the 2024 property tax year, and it will also be in effect for the 2025 property tax year. So the application process as it is being presented currently, which runs through March 31st, we'll do it again 12 months from now, and that'll be for the 2025 property tax year. So it's a 2-year program at this point in time, up to $500 of credit per primary household, primary residence, and no age income restrictions. So literally anyone is eligible to apply, and in all likelihood, the vast majority, if not all, literally will get the credit.
What's the price tag for this, or how much relief are North Dakotans getting? Let's do 1 year because that's simpler to think about. For 2024, I mean, how much is expected? I mean, I guess it depends on how many people apply for it, but I'm sure there was a fiscal note or a price tag or something that was put on this. How much relief is the state expecting to hand out through this?
You're correct. We'll have to wait and see how many applications come in. I'm expecting a 90+% application rate. Some people will move throughout the year and into next year as well. But the price tag is $103 million. So $103 million. And that is if every residential home in North Dakota qualified for credit, received the full 500. There are approximately 206,000 homes in the state. So we did the quick math on that. Simple math, 206,000 primary residence homes, or presumably, we don't know for sure all the time, but we have to assume they are, to be safe on the fiscal side, times 500, came up with the 103.
So the appropriation is if 100% of people did apply. So there's not going to be a situation where potentially somebody loses out on it because they apply on March 31st. There's plenty of money to do this. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. And we have received a few calls. We've gotten just a little bit of feedback. Will there be enough money to fund the program if I don't apply right away and I wait? And the short answer is there are ample funds if you apply on March 31st and you're the 206,000th applicant, you're going to still be in good shape from having the credit available to you. So we're not going to run out of money. As I've talked about to some of the folks, when you do a fiscal note and you don't have a baseline, we can't look at the trend and estimate with a little bit of cushion, but not a lot, because then that all adds into the budget. We want to be conservative and responsible how we go about that. New program really had to practice to perfection, so to speak, and look at if 100%, as you framed it up, apply. What's the cost to the state? And it's really not a cost to the state. It's how much of the taxpayer dollars are we going to return back to them? They're not state funds that we're returning. These are taxpayer funds that were already paid in.
So how many I saw a report that 20,000 people have applied to date. Do you have an updated number there of how many people have actually applied?
We do. I do, I should say, and it's been brisk. As of just prior to this call, I looked it up, and we are right at 35,000 applicants so far. And I would estimate by the end of the day, certainly into tomorrow, we'll push over the 40,000 mark. So activity has been brisk. We're monitoring the entire process. We're looking at how long does it take for someone to fill out the application on average. More than 1 out of 3 are rating the system and telling us how we did. We're asking them for that feedback. We want to know, because this is a little different way of going to market and the approach versus some of the other credits that have been out there. So it's new, but we wanted to automate it, making sure it was mobile friendly, desktop obviously friendly, and the feedback's been very positive.
Do you expect that? I mean, the $103 million, that was for both years? That's for 2024 and 2025?
No, that's just for 1 year.
Okay.
This spans bienniums. So we've got one property tax year in the current biennium. And then the next biennium, when lawmakers are back in Bismarck, 1 year from now, they'll be back. They're going to immediately have to appropriate another $103 million, which they will do. They're well aware of what they committed to, and they'll do that. So, but that's for 1 year. So collectively, just north of $200 million potentially. And I think it'll be a little less. People move. We know that during the year, moving the credits to a new residence. If someone decided to buy a new home in April, selling the one that they applied for in terms of the credit, we'll make sure that we get that moved to their new residence. If it meets the qualifications, which is still their primary residence.
Do you feel, I mean, this is obviously happening in the context of a larger debate about property taxes. There's ballot measure petitions being circulated right now to abolish the property tax. We don't know if that's going to make the ballot or not. I'm assuming it will, but I guess we'll find out. My question is this sustainable? I mean, because everybody's really concerned about the property taxes. This is a great 2-year program. Everybody should apply for it. Get your $500 off. But is this a temporary, I mean, is this really a permanent solution to the property tax issue?
No, I don't think anyone would want or would be able to say that this is a permanent solution to the concern people have, which are rapidly escalating property tax rates for the homes that they live in. It is something that helps mitigate that, depending on the size of your home, the value of your home, more importantly. It can mitigate it to some extent. For some individuals who live in very modest housing, it might cover the bulk of their property tax, but that's not the majority. Most people are going to see a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 property tax bill on average, and even north of that, I think certainly more. So does this solve or fix the concern that citizens have in terms of what their property tax bills are? And to me, I think the answer is no. It doesn't. The conversation will continue, and over the course of time, $500 becomes diluted quite quickly. So, but it's good in the sense that it has a sense of immediacy. It'll help a little bit for some, and it'll help more for others. But that conversation will continue to happen.
Commissioner Kroshus, when I first heard about this program, I was pretty concerned about the application and if people were going to be aware of it. And so I'm happy to hear that we're at 35,000 applications are brisk. I work at North Dakota United. We texted all of our members to make sure they were aware of it. People loved it. And I know other organizations are doing the same thing. What is the tax department in the state doing to make sure that everybody who's eligible is aware of this program? Because you sort of got to pay attention to what's going on, and people are busy, and sometimes they property taxes aren't exactly something people like talking about. So what are you all doing to make sure that everybody's aware of it, including coming on this podcast, obviously?
Sure. I've been on a number of shows this week, radio shows, some television interviews, quite a few newspaper, print interviews as well. So I've been busy on that in that space, and I'll continue to do so. We did start with a flyer in the property tax statements that people did receive in December, noting that this is for the next tax year, just so there wasn't confusion. And we have a robust marketing campaign lined up. Some of the spots are already running, both on radio, television. We've got print advertisements that'll be running as well. And we'll monitor if we feel like the pace is dropping off. We'll hit it again and look at all the different vehicles, because what works for one audience in terms of getting the message out may not work for another demographic. So we have to be aware of that, cognizant of that, and just I'm confident in our ability to get the word out to everyone. Greatly appreciate organizations like yours who are sharing it with members, and then that gets shared again. I've seen a lot of activity on social media, but we'll boost posts on social media, and we'll just continue to hit it hard. Lawmakers did appropriate some funding for us to get the word out, and we're trying to be as effective as possible. And I think we're doing a good job in that respect. It's early, but I think the fact that we already have 35,000 tomorrow at this time, and really in the early next week, I know we'll be pushing past the 50,000 based on the pace we're currently at. So we'll continue to monitor and adjust accordingly if needed.
Do you, as this goes forward, we've talked a lot about how easy it is on the website, and it really is. But not everybody has internet access. Not everybody likes to use the internet. Some people may still struggle a little bit with or feel confused by it. Is there another option other than going to the website? Can they call your office, for instance, to do this?
There is. We set up a dedicated phone line just for this program. We put some extra people on, And the phones, as mentioned, activity has been brisk. We're getting a lot of telephone calls right now, but there's a direct line. It's 328-7988. And that is, of course, area code 701, but 328-7988. We also have a toll-free number that we set up, which is 877-649-0112. So either way, if people call during business hours, we'll have someone standing by. Wait times overall have been really good. But we do have some periods of the day that we're monitoring and trying to heavy up with more operators at that particular time where it's extended. But typically wait times are less than 5 minutes, and that will subside as we continue to move through the process. It's just been a heck of a rush, to be really honest. As I mentioned, activity has been brisk so far. But for those who don't have access to a computer, we will help them literally fill it out for them as we take their information over the phone. But one important thing to note, we will not call individuals and ask for information, particularly their social security number. We're getting to that time of year. It's tax season. Scammers do come out of the woodwork this time of year in particular. So something for viewers, our listeners, I should say, to keep in mind. We will never call and ask for your personal information. So if you get a call and you're solicited for any reason, anything related to a tax question or tax issue, just for folks to keep that in mind and be aware.
Commissioner, I'm going to shift gears just slightly, staying on property taxes, but there's another great program that the legislature has started years ago, and I think expanded this last session, and that's the homestead tax credit that really assists older people and also disabled people to pay for their property taxes. Can you talk a little bit about that, the eligibility, what the timeline is for that? Because I think that is a super underutilized program, and we often hear about, older people who are getting taxed out of their homes or whatever. And so I want to make sure that everybody's aware of this program that really helps in those situations to help elderly and, again, disabled people pay for their property taxes. Can you talk about that program?
Absolutely. I appreciate that question, Chad. And you're right. It's a very important space issue. Lawmakers did expand the homestead property tax credit, and just a couple of the changes, really more prominent changes. Before the average, or not the average, but the income level threshold, the maximum that could be made was $42,000. That moved to $70,000, which really expanded the program. Far more people obviously are eligible now to apply. So that household income threshold moving from $42,000 to $70,000 really opens the door for quite a number of individuals, families, people to apply for that now that weren't necessarily eligible in the past because of going past the $42,000. So that was a great move, I think, by the Legislative Assembly. And the age restriction is still in place for that program, which is 65 and older. Unlike the primary residence credit, no income or age restrictions on that one. But that was really good news, I thought, in terms of the homestead property tax credit expansion. Really good news for a lot of lower income households, people on fixed incomes, retirees. It really helps quite a number of folks. So, and the other part was they moved from 100% benefit or a 50% benefit. If you make more than $40,000, the benefit is $50,000 or 50%, I should say. If you make less than that, it's at 100%. And those rates are a little bit better than the 5-tier system they had in place before. But I would encourage people to apply for that. Unlike the primary residence credit, that application goes through the counties. So they would have to go, anyone who thinks they may qualify, definitely check it out. But we get phone calls on that as well, and we help people walk them through and point them in the right direction, and sometimes even help them with their application as well.
Brian, like I said previously, we're having this conversation in the context of a debate over property taxes and long, I think, simmering consternation from the public about the property taxes. It's a really complex issue, but there is a proposal, if it makes the ballot, to abolish property taxes. And one thing that I struggle with this is, how do we eliminate a massive revenue source for local government. How do we replace those revenues? Because we're not just going to eliminate local government. We're still going to have a lot of, you could argue maybe there's fat on the bone at the county or whatever that could be trimmed. I don't know. I don't know what the budget looks like where you live, but maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but we're still going to have to spend something. It's a lot of money. You work with our state's revenues all the time. You're the tax commissioner. How difficult would it be for the state to replace property tax revenues? Because obviously that's what happened. If we take that away from the locals, the state of North Dakota, the legislature is going to have to replace those revenues. From your perspective, how difficult would that be?
I think there are challenges in terms of that particular approach. And what we're really talking about isn't eliminating property tax. What we're talking about, in my opinion, is how those property taxes are paid. Who cuts the check? And you can look at it from the standpoint that, well, the state's going to cut the check. Well, where do state funds come from? They come from taxpayers. So the tax base that is created by the different forms of taxation, whether it's sales tax. I realize in this particular proposal, in fairness, they're talking a lot about legacy fund earnings, which will get partway in terms of funding, but not all of the way. So then there are other decisions that will have to be made. And I think citizens just have to weigh out how we fund different priorities. Where do those dollars, those revenue dollars go? And again, they're not state dollars. We can say, well, the state's going to pick up your property tax bill, but if those funds, which they are generated from businesses, that can impact the cost of goods, and also from citizens, whether it's income tax, sales tax. Those are things that have to be weighed out. And I'm looking forward to the conversations surrounding that, because I think people for it, opponents will have their opportunity to make their case. The proponents will, and opponents alike will have their opportunity to make their case. I think it does create some challenges, but more so, I think, is this where the dollars, from a state perspective, is this where we want those particular dollars to go in the future? And it will have a ripple effect of sort into other areas. So it's really about making a decision on where some of those legacy fund earning dollars, for example, go. But there will be some other areas of revenue that we'll have to tap into as well to cover it if it should pass.
And I think the fundamental question on it, and you mentioned priorities, is who's setting those priorities? Is it your local county commission? Is it your local school board? Or is it the state legislature, right? And I think this makes sure that the legislature gets to determine all the priorities for communities and that kind of thing. Speaking of state budgets, I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully you have an answer for it. One of the things that I've noticed is during the legislative session, and I say this sort of tongue in cheek, we're always really, really poor. And then right after the session is done, we're flush with money. Are we doing an effective job of planning for our budgets and forecasting revenue and that sort of thing? I mean, are you comfortable with where we're at in terms of what we're giving to the legislature? I understand that's not just your job, it's OMB's involved and all that kind of thing. But how do you feel about the way we're doing budget forecasting in the state?
I don't know that the forecasting is, I think the forecasting in general is conservative, which it should be. But then we look back into the 2015, 2016, 2017 time period, and campaigns were won and lost based on the fact that we were in a budget deficit situation. We have a cyclical economy because we are commodity driven, both on the energy side, agriculture, monetary policy plays a big role in that. And one thing that's interesting, sometimes the country overall is struggling, but you look at North Dakota and we're doing incredibly well, because when the economy isn't doing quite as well and the dollar weakens, commodity pricing typically rises. because it's proportionate in terms of the value of the dollar. So our farming community does better, our ag community, which is fantastic. We like to see that, obviously. Energy does well. But then when it turns the other way, which it did, and we had the downturn again in that time period I referenced, we have some challenges. So I think we have to be careful on the budgeting front. But when lawmakers come to town and they arrive in Bismarck, you have to realize we have 141 different opinions, 141 different sets of campaign promises made to different sets of constituents that all have different needs and wants, oftentimes very consistent, but sometimes very different in nature because of the geography, whatever industry is driving that local area or supporting that local area. So when you have 141 different opinions and 141 different sets of needs, it's a fascinating part of the process, but it's also interesting in terms of how do you get your arms around that. And it's a part of the process, and it starts really with who do you send for your respective district to Bismarck to represent you, and are they effective? Because they only have one vote. So each one has one vote, but they can have a much larger voice than just that one vote. So you want effective communicators when they get to town.
Brian, I thank you so much for coming on. This is a great program. If you Google North Dakota Tax Commissioner, you'll find the tax commissioner's website. It's the first result. You click that. There's a big old link right on the front page if you want to put in to get. And there's also some information about some of the other property tax credits and things that we talked about on the show. But the big one, the $500, there's a big old link there. I'd be surprised if it took you 5 minutes. The one thing, you'll need your social security number, obviously. You'll need the parcel number for your property as well. You might want to look that up first. If you go to your county website, I'm in Ward County, for instance. It took me like 5 clicks of the mouse to find it. Honestly, it was super simple. It's very easy to find most places. Go to your county website. But if you have your parcel number, your social security number, that's really all you need. You need to know your name too. I'm assuming you know that. It's really that simple. Like I said, less than 5 minutes. You should apply for this. Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Kudos, Commissioner, for the great work.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that very much, gentlemen. Have a good day.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, welcome to Plain Talk. Just finished up a conversation. Seriously, apply for that property tax credit. It's a good thing. It's not the solution to property taxes, but I think we all need a break. And for the next couple of years, we're going to get one. And that's a good thing. And that gives us some space to figure out what we're going to do with that issue going forward. But now we're going to switch gears. Our Congressman, Kelly Armstrong, joins us. Kelly, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I agree with it. You know, at least if you have a surplus and you don't have property taxes vexed a lot of state policymakers ever since I was in state government, but at least they're doing this way, and it's a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's a give and take, and like you said, we have a surplus, we have a lot of money sitting around. Property taxes have vexed people for a while. What better way? Give people relief for a while, but we still need to figure out what the long-term policy is going to be. Kelly, a lot of things happening in nationally, a lot of things happening in North Dakota. You have a potential challenger, Trigg V. Hammer, for the Democrats, has not officially announced, but he filed the paperwork. And I guess maybe now he's spoken to other media. He's called. He wants to come on the podcast. That was their first. I had called him. He didn't call me back, but then his campaign manager sent me an email and said, we want to be on the podcast. So he's going to be on next Friday. But Trigg, he's a known quantity, ran for statewide office, ran for the Public Service Commission last year. So North Dakotans know him a little bit. What do you think about him getting in the race?
We always assume we're going to have an opponent. I don't know him personally. Chad probably does. I've heard good things. He's a military veteran. We welcome anybody to the race. You guys know me. I think we're all better when we have legitimate opponents. It's a tough gig to try and do this as a Democrat in North Dakota. I wish him all the best, and I'm going to do everything I can to win.
Yeah, Trygve Hammer is a real candidate, a good candidate. He was very impressive. I remember at the last state convention. And so I'm happy he's getting in the race because I think the more quality people we have running, the better it is.
You're going to have to work a little bit on his numbers.
Yeah. As well, speaking of quality or not quality candidates, there's a state legislator in Western North Dakota who's been in the news. And I wanted your take on what's going on with Nico Rios, because I don't know if you remember this, Kelly, but I do.
I know who he is now.
You do. A few months ago, he called for you to be primaried because of, I think it was you supporting people's freedom to enter contracts with whoever they want to in marriage. So I want he was very forthright in his opinion on what should happen to you politically. What do you think Mr. Rios should do, and do you think he should resign?
Well, first of all, as somebody who used to represent people with DUIs and did this work for a long time, oftentimes you're dealing with somebody at their absolute worst moment. If he has an alcohol problem, if he has all of those things, I wish him nothing but the best. That is a tough thing to go through, whether you're in the legislature or not. We all have family have done that. That being said, I can give you a fairly unique take on this as somebody who's watched a lot of these videos and represented a lot of people over the years. You kind of hit the trifecta of what not to do. Do you know who I am? The insult, throw in a little bit of xenophobia, homophobia, all of those other things. I'm calling the attorney general. And it's a little hard to give people grace when they give nothing in return and have given nothing in return. And I'm just always curious why it's always the tough guy personas that have the worst DUI videos.
The thing about it is, I look at this. There's two distinct things going on here. First, by his own admission, innocent until proven guilty, but he's acknowledged he drove drunk. So I'm taking that.
I have a DUI. I got a DUI in college.
I got one.
The DUI is not the problem in that video. The DUI is always the problem. You're driving on the road. You're running risk. You're doing that.
And neither of us.
That's not the problem in the video.
Neither of us are making excuses for that. I got one. You got one.
I got one too. 3 for 3, boys.
Yeah, not great.
Not great at all.
Every one of I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't threaten to go through the Rolodex on my phone and call some political figure. I didn't make racist comments or homophobic comments. I didn't verbally abuse the cops. In fact, Kelly, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. I admitted my guilt immediately. He got me. I knew.
Yeah, I would recommend, as a former defense attorney, I'd recommend not doing that right away.
Yeah, well,
use the Fifth Amendment.
I completely acquiesce. I did it. I took my lumps and life moved on. But to me, the other part of it is the things he said. And you could say, he's at his worst moment and everything. But I don't know. A lot of people are at their worst moments. A lot of people are, have stressful moments or horrible moments or trying moments or what have you. And they don't resort to bigoted comments, right? They don't resort to that. So to me, I guess I'm looking at that. I don't see it as an excuse, Kelly. And not that you said it was.
No, not at all. And like I said, this is, you don't get the benefit of your worst moment when some of your best moments, at least online, aren't particularly flattering to begin with either. But this is why we're talking about, I ran against Carmond, I ran against Max Schneider, now I've got Trygve Hammer. This is also the problem when you win a convention, you have an uncontested primary, you have an uncontested general, and you're there. Everybody would be better served if our races are more competitive, because you may be able to sort some of this stuff out. But I don't know how you expect to represent an entire district as somebody who's done this when you're going to be dealing with these questions and this stuff all the time. So, I also don't think, Rob, I read your article about the legislature should kick him out. I disagree with that too. I think if I was advising him, I would advise him he should resign. But I also don't think you leave an entire district without representation over this kind of stuff.
So, Kelly, and Rob mentioned this a few days ago. There's some expectation that Governor Burgum will make his decision on to run or not to run in the next couple of weeks. You've said in the past, if he does not run, that you would look seriously at the governor's race. You've announced that you're running for the House of Representatives. Has anything changed in your thinking on this since we spoke months ago?
No, not at all. I mean, I think politics is so fluid and so dynamic right now. I can concentrate on what I'm doing. As you said, we just got an opponent in our House race. I've been very active in a lot of different things, whether it's the political knife fights go on in D.C. or I got to lead an entire group to COP for the Energy and Commerce Committee. And I mean, I have no inside knowledge at all. I just fully expect Doug to run again, and I hope he does.
We're seeing one of your former colleague in the state Senate, Tom Campbell. You guys were both first elected to the, if I'm remembering right, we're both elected to the state Senate the first year, or in the same year. He's firing some cruise missiles at Governor Burgum. He was on another radio show and, essentially said, Governor Burgum is, he ran and did the presidential thing. He's already been there 8 years. In fact, I should have had the quote ready, but like an idiot, I didn't have it ready. So what he said essentially is 8 years is enough. Let's move on. He's done the presidential thing. He bought the governor's seat. In essence, he tried to buy the presidential seat, which failed. I mean, he's saying those things. Would that change your calculus? I mean, if Governor Burgum chooses not to run and Tom Campbell's in there, obviously he wants to run for governor. Although he says he hasn't made up his mind. He clearly wants it. Does that change your calculus at all that somebody like Tom Campbell might be in that race?
No, I'll do what I think is best for North Dakota. Again, those are decisions. I make decisions pretty quickly. I think you guys know that about me, but I'm concentrating on the re-election. I will say this. It's easy to criticize somebody and it's easy to do those types of things. I would caution anyone from doing that. I think Doug has done a good job as governor. I think it was good for North Dakota that he ran for president. I think it's pretty hard to host a fundraiser for him at your lake cabin in June and then trash him 6 months later. I think that you have to have more than procedural arguments. And by the way, I don't like the term limits bill. I don't mind it actually for executive branch people. I think it's really bad for a volunteer legislature. I know Governor Burgum supported that, and that can be a little awkward, but he gets played by the same rules. You can support something, and now that it's law, everybody gets to answer it. And more importantly, you make process arguments to a judge, you make compelling arguments to a jury, and you're going to have to do a lot better than that to unseat Doug Burgum if you're going to run against him. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, for the life of me, reading that Tom Campbell story, trying to figure out where his lane would be and like how he would take on Burgum as a wealthy person who sold land to Bill Gates. I mean, it's the pro-Bill Gates, anti-Doug Burgum lane. I don't know where the lane is for Tom Campbell. It's like he's one toe is with the Becker camp, 1 foot in the other camp. I just don't know where that lane is if he decides to do it. And I know that some people are saying that Burgum is like his numbers are down and what Doug Burgum runs for the nomination, he's going to win the nomination. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He's got the resources. His popularity did not take that big of a dip. I think he'll be there.
Yeah, no, I'll defend Tom Campbell a little bit too. As a private landowner, if you're going to sell land and you're getting a price for it, I mean, that's the problem with free market, and it's far more good than bad. I mean, I think that's somewhat of an unfair criticism, but I think when you run for politics, I've seen this a lot. Criticisms come whether they're fair or not. So,
Kelly, you think my criticism of that is, I mean, imagine what the right is going to say about this if he gets into a primary. It's going to be brutal.
It's going to be interesting. Switching back to Representative Rios, we had kind of a thing where the House Majority Leader, Mike LaFleur, called on Representative Rios to resign. I know, Kelly, you disagreed with me about the expulsion thing. We could have a debate about that. I will acknowledge that that's the nuclear option. That should be a last resort thing. I am very uncomfortable with the legislature, except in very extreme circumstances, using that tool. I think this qualifies for it. That's a debate for another time. On this instance, though, we had Representative LaFleur come out. He called for Representative Rios to resign. We have the District 23 Executive Committee for the Republican Party. They called on him to resign. They said they no longer have the confidence that he can represent the voters of District 23. That's something that you said as well. State Party Chair Sandy Sanford was quoted in the press release sent out by Majority Leader Mike LaFleur saying that she supported his call for him to resign. Everybody, including myself, reported that as Chair Sanford being one of the people calling on Representative Rios to resign. But then she goes on a radio show and says, oh, I didn't call on him to resign. And then proceeded to have a very uncomfortable 15 minutes explaining how she could support the majority leader's call for him to resign, but not call. Looking at that seems, I don't know, that seems very confused. As a member of the Republican Party, what are you making of all that?
Well, I haven't listened to the radio interview, so I don't know exactly how it is. I did notice, I think when you parse words, this should be easy. This is an easy thing to do. And I get in trouble in DC a lot when I vote for censures, when I vote against censures, when I deal with all of these different issues. This isn't forcing about. This isn't, using the party position. This is just easy. You either say, I think that is unbecoming, the comments and how he talked to that law enforcement officer. And by the way, it wasn't just one thing. I mean, he made fun of the guy for being British. He obviously put some thought into this.
Yeah, he said he didn't think that foreigners should be allowed to arrest Americans. He said that migrants and refugees were invading his country and raping his women. He used slurs for homosexuals. He called the officer a traitor. Yeah, anyway, I wanted to expand on that because it was...
Your answer to that is he should resign. I don't think he should resign, or no comment. Anything else in between is just trying to parse things and you get yourself into trouble. So who you are, if you're the state party chair, the majority leader, the District 23, or just the at-large congressman talking to two dudes on a podcast, just pick one of those three. Those are your three answers. Just pick one.
So, Kelly, let's talk a little bit about your day job of being a congressman for the great state of North Dakota. You're in the majority party. You got a new speaker. I think your majority is down to 2 seats now. I mean, it seems like it's getting tighter and tighter. How's Speaker Johnson doing from your perspective? Do you think you all are going to do anything this year? What does the next year in Congress look like leading up to the presidential election in 2024?
One, I think I've said this before. I think it's the toughest job in politics. 2, I think he's doing a good job. I think if we can negotiate a top line with the Senate here, the problem with the Senate top line number, which is really wonky, but it's all based on the debt ceiling deal. And now we seem to have consensus on our side that we're actually going to honor the debt ceiling number, but there's some side deals to that. I think the immigration issue is the right fight to pick. This isn't a new fight for Republicans. I've been watching some news on my little anniversary getaway, and it's shocking how everybody's just come to the realization that we sent HR 2 over to the Senate in May. Like, this is the issue that this and permitting and energy reform were the first 2 bills we passed. I think he's got a really tough job with a 2-vote majority. I think on both sides of the aisle, you just have, politics has gotten so weird and the incentive structure is so different that it's very difficult to get consensus on anything. And we're going to do everything we can to work forward. But I think we have a rare opportunity, right? I was one of the guys who negotiated the first CR that we couldn't pass because 25 or 31 Republicans voted against it, that incorporated HR 2 into the first CR fight. Because I believe I really do. I believe this is one of the rare places where we can actually do something really good for the country and get a political win. And I think it's the fight we should be picking. I obviously thought that 5 months ago, and I think we should continue through it. That being said, I gave a quote to, I think, the Washington Post, where I said, I wish Senate Democrats would find it in their hearts and come to believe that HR 2 is the solution to the immigration problem. The problem is I live in the real world. So if we expect all of that or nothing, we're going to get nothing. And we should be fighting for substantive immigration changes that will actually give us operational control of the border. And we should pick that fight.
Kelly, one of your colleagues, Troy Nels, basically said, I'm not supporting anything because it'll be a political win for Joe Biden. So when I asked what's going to happen over the next year... He basically said that, but he didn't exactly say that, Chad. He said we had sent HR 2. I don't know if he used the exact date. He said, I'm not willing to go very far off of HR 2 because it's a win. And there's a little something to that. Right. So we have this bipartisan gang in the Senate that's negotiating their own border deal at the last minute. The White House gets into it 1 week before Christmas, and everybody just forgets that we sent them a bill in May.
And somehow they think if they negotiate that deal in the Senate, they're just going to send it over to the House and we're all going to say, sure, great. That's not how it works. When Speaker McCarthy negotiated the debt ceiling deal, he negotiated directly with the White House, because you got to get House Republicans on board too. It doesn't matter if you're Senate Democrat or Senate Republican. So
go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, Chad. It's your show. There you go, buddy. Go ahead, Chad.
But I think my overall point on this Troy Nell's quote is, how do you get anything done when you do have this election in November that's hanging over everybody's head? And I suppose every decision is always political and thinking about the next election, but it seems particularly difficult.
Yeah, I think the window is really, the next 60 to 90 days at the most. And that's not unique. That's every presidential election year. We still care about a FISA reauthorization with significant reform. We've got 2 government funding deadlines. Regardless of where you're at, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan is going to be a part of that conversation. But not a lot of things move in presidential election years. And so on the plus side, I'm hopeful we can get somewhere on the farm bill as something that's a little less politically toxic than some of those other issues. But we're going to have to figure a lot of these things out in the near future, because you start moving into June and July in a presidential year, none of this stuff's going to move. And then you're just doing 1 year delay, 1 year extensions or 6 month extensions. And for FISA, if you do that, there's no reform. If you do that for government funding, it's not a great way to do it. It's not as efficient. So we've got a lot of work to do, and it's going to be really tough.
I know we're bouncing kind of all over the map here, but bringing it back to North Dakota again, there's been I am one of them. I have written that there is the potential for a perception problem for the North Dakota Republican Party when you start going down the list of things that have been making headlines recently, whether it's, former Senator Ray Holmberg, whether it's, the Nico Rios thing, whether it's, Brandon Pritchard making headlines, whether it's the executive director hire at the North Dakota Republican Party that lasted for 10 days because, his social media came out. There's the emails at the Attorney General's office. There's the Attorney General's office space. There's a lot of stuff right now. Are you worried that that's going to hurt? I mean, what do Republicans do to tell North Dakota voters, listen, we're still the same party that you've been voting for 3 decades?
Well, I think all of those are in little different buckets, but there's too much of it.
Sure, that's fair. I didn't want to. I'm not connecting the dots, saying these are all connected. It's just, to me, it's more of a perception thing where it's, I'm a voter sitting at home and I'm scrolling through the headlines and it's one after another after another.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody puts his name on the ballot, I just saw Trigby's one of his interviews, and he was talking about Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan. I'm like, well, I get that too, but eventually you have to have a candidate, and they have to run against who they're running against. I'm going to run on my record. I will answer tough questions about any of those incidents. I think you guys know I don't dodge questions. I think we oftentimes don't do a good job in politics of holding our own side accountable. That's not unique to North Dakota. We did with George Santos and take a lot of heat from our own side on that because they care more about math than they do about, Congress having a lower approval rating than the plague. And so I think we have to deal with all of those things. But yeah, if somebody's on the ballot, I want to run on what I want to talk about. I've taken thousands of votes in Congress. There's a lot of things to criticize me on. I don't need to spend an entire campaign defending the actions of anybody else, Republican or Democrat. But I think eventually, if you're going to win an election in North Dakota, whether you're Democrat or Republican, you better be running on what you care about, what you want, what you think is best for the state, and you better be listening to the voters. And if you're gonna try and run against somebody by bringing up a lot of other people, I've never seen that work. We tried for 20 years to run against Nancy Pelosi, no matter who was on the ballot, and it never really worked as we did it. You have to run as your candidate, and you have to take on the person you're running against. It's really hard to deal with all of those things, but there's too much of it, and we should clean it up.
You said something really interesting that in politics, neither side does a very good job of holding their own side accountable. And I think that's interesting if we zoom up to like a 30,000 foot level. I think that's really true, and I wonder if that's what's driving the propensity of people like a Representative Rios, just as one example, who do something that I feel like in another political era would have unquestionably led to their resignation, or George Santos, who shouldn't have needed to be expelled, should have resigned, or Bob Menendez, who still continues to serve in the United States Senate. Do you think...
Well, the Senate Ethics Committee is something else, man. I don't even know why they have one. I mean, I can tell you, as somebody who served on the ethics, and I mean this, and I believe this in all sincerity. I know the Democrats that serve on the Ethics Committee in the House. If Senator Menendez was in the House of Representatives, he wouldn't be in the House of Representatives. Like, I mean, there's only so much you can get there. In fact, probably the one guy on ethics that would have been saying, wait a second here a little bit, would have been the former defense attorney, although sooner or later you get to those types of places. But I think it's more of a reflection of social media. I mean, this is going to be a podcast. This is all of those different issues. And I've said this a lot. Being Twitter famous in DC is a lot like being the host of an outdoor show. You think you're famous, but you're only famous to a subsect of whitetail or walleye fishermen who already think they know more about walleye fishing than you do. And people should really work on, trying to do what's good for their constituency and less about how many likes and clicks they get. And that doesn't go just for politics, by the way, that goes for society at large.
So, Kelly, I've been thinking about this dysfunction in Washington and sort of your accessibility back in the state. I mean, people generally like you. I mean, I like you. I hate to admit that too publicly, but I do.
You can like me and not vote for me, Chad. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't even. I for sure like you. How about that? How do you like? In all seriousness, how do you like serving in Congress? Like, is it like a satisfying thing for you to go to work and do the work that you have to do in this sort of messed up environment that you're serving in?
I joke, but it's not entirely joking. I'll start with, I'm glad I'm there. That's not always the same thing as liking it.
Sure.
But I was an American Legion baseball coach, and I ran a baseball club for 10 years. So I've dealt with youth sports parents, and I was also a public defender for 10 years. So I've dealt with some pretty interesting clientele. And to be honest, those two things have given me more experience for how to deal with Congress than my 6 years in the state legislature. And that's really true. I'm concerned, my friend Blaine Luetkemeyer just announced he's retiring. Both sides. You see this a lot, by the way, for like on the Democratic side, you see more retirements 2 years after you lose the majority than you do the year you lose the majority. We're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, whether it's Patrick McHenry, Blaine Luetkemeyer, Bill Johnson's going to take over Youngstown State. I'm really happy for him. But I think if we don't have people there that, I'm on a never-ending quest to prove you don't have to be crazy to be conservative. And I don't know if I'm succeeding or failing, but I mean that. And so there's a lot of people there that are really trying to do the best work in divided government. And a lot of times the oxygen gets sucked out from the loudest voices on both sides. And and a lot of these guys are my friends. I spent a lot of time and negotiated that CR with Chip Roy. Chip Roy is a smart guy. I've served on oversight with him. I'm back on judiciary with him. I just think you have to see the forest through the trees. It's not that Chip and I don't agree on almost everything. It's just, I understand that 50% of the population, and more importantly, 50% of Congress doesn't. And so you have to figure out a way to get wins when you can. We have a 2-vote majority in the House. Democrats have a 1-vote majority in the Senate and a Democrat in the White House. Like, you're not getting big legislation passed from the most conservative side of the ideological spectrum. That's just math. That doesn't mean I'm wrong or he's right or I'm wrong. It just means we have to figure out a way to move something. And I think we have a real opportunity to stop the influx of illegal immigration that is occurring right now. And we should take every opportunity to do that under the guise of divided government.
I liked your analogy to sports parents. And I don't normally like sports analogies because I think as a culture we put as much as I love baseball, it's a game. I think as a culture we put way too much emphasis on the importance of sports. But I thought that was a good one because I've written articles about the number of officials and coaches who have gotten out of umping or reffing or being coaches because they're tired of how toxic some of the people participating is. And we see the same thing happening in politics where, here in North Dakota, I'm hearing from local officials, sometimes not even elected officials, but, particularly like city council county commission and stuff who are just tired of it, who are saying, I never got into it for the money because these positions don't exactly pay well. I'm not in it for the power because there's really not that much. And I'm just tired of getting abused. What would be, as a public servant who's serving obviously on one of the biggest political stages of the country, what's your advice to some of these people who are just starting to feel burned out? Because what worries me is that we're losing good people, we're losing institutional knowledge, and I sometimes question. I mean, not that every new person who comes into office is bad. That's not what I'm saying either. But I wonder if that leaves a vacuum. I wonder about what's going to fill it.
Well, I think there's a second part to this that's really important. There's a whole bunch of people in politics that wanted to go back to the way it was in 1996. That's not happening. So you better be able to adapt. And losing institute. There's two things for any organization that's bad, right? Too much turnover or not enough turnover. Nobody's entitled to these jobs. I'm not entitled to this job. But I think you better recognize how you can adapt and deal with some of these things in the new dynamic. And I think that's difficult for people who have served for a while that are below the radar, really big policy wonks and don't, the social media stuff and all of those different things. But I also think, to go with it is, when I was the president of the club, I didn't have a kid in the program. My son wasn't even born yet. And I'd go to games and we'd have hometown fans like yelling at umpires. And I'd sit down next to them and I'd pull out a piece of paper from my pocket and I'd hand it to them. And it was an application to umpire. And they'd open it and they'd look at it and they're like, well, I don't have time to do this. I'm like, then why don't we shut the bleep up? Because I only need two things to play a baseball game. Only two. I need officials and I need players. I don't need coaches and I don't need fans. But if I don't have umpires, I can't play games. If we don't have people that understand tax policy, we can't write conservative tax policy. If we don't have people that are willing to take the fight to something, to the media and to a lot of different things that I've seen, then we don't get our message across. Both of these things serve our purpose. Unfortunately, I think in both parties, we spend more time fighting with each other necessarily than we do about the bigger issues. And it's a volatile time, but it's a consequential time. So I want as many smart people who want to do the right thing in DC as possible. And that's the advice I'd give them. I'd be like, it's never going back to the way it was. Figure out a way to operate in it. And if you can't, just turn off your social media. Let your staff run it. Don't even look at it and deal with it after that.
Well, Kelly, I appreciate you coming on as always and talking about all these things. And I enjoy your anniversary that you're celebrating right now. 20 years. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
I like that balloon that's behind you there, Kelly. Is that 20?
That's 20. You know how hard it was to convince somebody really smart to stay with me for 20 years? Like I do politics constantly every day.
And apparently to marry you in the winter?
Yeah. Well, she is from Oslo, Norway.
Okay, that's true.
We got married on January 3rd in a 750-year-old church in a little suburb of Oslo, and it was really, really cool. And I had the flu.
Jess and I got married on December 30th in the Sleep Inn in Minot. So there's that.
Same.
And then
not same for me.
And
same
then
for you two.
And then being a total northern guy born in Alaska, I convinced her to go to the Rockies in Colorado in January for our honeymoon. We stayed at the Stanley Hotel, which inspired the Overlook Hotel from The Shining.
So Aaron and our honeymoon was to Wrigley Field to watch the Los Angeles Dodgers play the Chicago Cubs.
How did you pick your honeymoon?
So it was not supposed to be a honeymoon. It was supposed to be an after wedding trip, and then we're going to go on a real honeymoon later on.
And that hasn't happened.
We never really did that after that big trip later on. So it still comes up. You guys would be shocked to know from Aaron periodically.
I would be shocked if it didn't still come up.
Yeah. I feel like I am on Team Aaron in this. It should still come up, Chad.
Yeah. By the way, do Immaculate Grid. I'm proud of my Mets line today.
Okay. I have not yet filled out my Immaculate Grid either, so we'll have to do that. Kelly, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.